Friday was a day the Marat HaMachpela was reserved for use by Muslims in commemoration of Ramadan. Muslims used the opportunity to desecrate the tomb of the patriarchs.
What I found here were Hamas flags in the tomb of Abraham, our patriarch. There's still a flag on the floor. We found also a flag in the tomb of Jacob. In addition to these flags, they desecrated the place. They urinated on our Torah ark and desecrated this holy site. I'm furious. It's unacceptable. They have no connection to these graves.
Shalom to David Wilder of the Hebron Jewish community.
Shalom Aleichem.
So, what happened in the tomb?
As people may or may not be aware, the tomb of the patriarchs, Marat HaMachpela, is divided between Arabs and Jews, excepting 20 days during the year. 10 days a year, we receive the whole building and it's closed to the Arabs, and 10 days a year, it's open entirely to the Arabs and it's closed to the Jews. Those days usually fall on our respective holidays. During the month of Ramadan, it's usually closed to the Jews every Friday. This past Friday was the first Friday of Ramadan this year. We discovered on Motzei Shabbat that when the Arabs were in there, number one, they had desecrated one of the holy arks, the Aron Kodesh. They had urinated right next to it, and one of the men went in and found a big puddle of urine there right next to the Aron Kodesh, the holy ark. And he also found a number of Hamas flags that had been thrown into the memorials for the patriarchs and the matriarchs. Some of them were removed. I was just down there and found two of them that were still inside, one in the memorial for Abraham and one in the memorial for Yaakov.
Now, can you tell us, why would Muslims be given control of a Jewish holy site?
That's a great question. I wish I had a really great answer. Look, for 700 years, the site was closed to anybody who was not Muslim. The Arabs claim that it's a mosque. They call it the Abraham Mosque, Miskat Ibrahimi, and claim that they're the only ones that have any rights to be there, and they say that if they ever control it, that they won't let us in because only Muslims can pray in a mosque. However, Jews, being as they are, believe that especially holy sites should be accessible to anyone who wants to be able to be there. Avram Avinu, where our father Abraham, the patriarch Abraham, was called the father of all nations, and being that way, the site is accessible to anybody, unless it's closed at night. But these 10 days, it was decided a number of years ago, the 10 days we would have access to the entire building. Otherwise, we have no access to the Isaac Hall, which is the largest and most ornate and the most important room. That's in the hands of the Muslims. That was given to them by the Defense Ministry. They have a mosque there. And the only time we have access is 10 days during the year. The other part of the building where we are is accessible to the Muslims 10 days a year, and they get it on their holidays, and that's what happened this past Friday, and we're hoping that we'll be able to stop them from continuing this next Friday and the Friday after and the Friday after, because we see what happens when when it's abandoned to them, there's damage done, and in this case we saw desecration.
Now, is this the first time Muslims have desecrated the tomb?
No. A number of years ago, there was a small pogrom in Marat HaMachpela, and Sifrei Torah were destroyed. They were buried in the ancient Jewish cemetery in Hebron, and those graves also were desecrated, and the remains of those Torah scrolls were stolen. There have been books that have been torn up and thrown around. We found, on occasion, books of Psalms, Tehillim that have been ripped up, destroyed, desecrated, and pieces all over the place, either outside the building or inside the building. There's also other times when there's damage done to property. Also on Shabbat, we have a big water urn to boil water for one of the study groups that's there, and that also had been damaged, and all the water inside was on the floor on Saturday night. This isn't something that's new. Unfortunately, though, almost nothing is done to try to prevent it.
Now, why would the government continue to give Muslims control over a location they have desecrated?
That's a good question. You're asking a lot of good questions. I don't have a lot of good answers. I think they don't care. If it was the opposite way around, there was an instance where a young woman was imprisoned, I think, for over 2 years because she she drew a picture of a pig on a Quran or labeled it Muhammad or something like that, and she was put in jail for 2 years for incitement. If this had happened on the other side, in other words, if Jews had been accused of urinating where the Arabs have their mosque, then this would be headline news in the radio and television and internet and everywhere else, and there would be police there all day. And here we see absolutely nothing happened. I spoke to some of the commanders there who even doubted whether the event had actually occurred, whether anything had really happened. So we see that there's a double standard. It's a two-way street, and when it happens to us, so it just is ignored, and when it happens to them, then there's a world war.
You made mention of Hamas flags. Is the Muslim Arab population in Hebron mostly supportive of Hamas?
Oh yes, they have been for quite a long time. There's a very large Hamas population in Hebron. There's an Islamic Jihad population in Hebron. They have been the majority in Hebron for quite a long time. It's no secret. And thank God the security forces work very hard. There's a tremendous amount of what we would call siyata d'shmaya, divine assistance, and the security forces are able to prevent them from their attempts at terror here in Hebron or outside of Hebron. But Hamas is a very, very strong factor in Arab Hebron.
Now, is there any chance of a repeat of the 1929 pogrom against the Jewish community?
Look, people here, thank God, are armed. People have ways to protect themselves. People didn't have that protection in 1929. As a matter of fact, they had the possibility of receiving arms, and they refused to take those arms then because they believed that the Arabs would protect them and that they were better off with Arab protection than being able to try to protect themselves. They didn't believe it would happen then. Today, thank God, there are security forces. People here are also combat trained, and there are emergency squads, and people are armed. And should there ever be an attempt made, but look, we've seen. Look, I was about 5-6 years ago when 12 men were killed between Hebron and Kiryat Arba. There have been other terror attacks which have been very deadly, and there have been others that have, thank God, been prevented. There are always attempts being made. And sometimes we see it not necessarily happening in Hebron, but we see it happening elsewhere when a bus blows up and the like. It's the same thing.
David Wilder, thank you very much.
Thank you. Shalom, shalom.